The dust of the high plains clung to Elias McGraw like a second skin as he rode alone toward the sagging wooden gate. His horse, a tired chestnut mare, blew heavy breath into the hot wind. Elias tugged her reins and stared at the land that had cost him everything. Rolling acres of dry earth, thorn bushes clinging to life, a crooked barn standing like a drunk who had forgotten how to fall. He had emptied his last coin purse on this place, staking not just his fortune, but whatever was left of his pride. Every mile of the trail behind him whispered of mistakes and debts, but here he was, clinging to a dream that had the sour taste of desperation. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching against the brittle grass. His eyes roamed across the ranch house, its roof patchworked with tin and rotted boards. No smoke in the chimney, no sign of welcome, only silence, a silence so complete it pressed against his chest like an iron weight. He remembered the saloon in Dodge where he signed the deed, the notary warning him in hushed tones, the barkeep refusing to meet his gaze. "That farm's no good, McGraw," they had said. "Men don't last out there." Elias had laughed them off then, but the laughter had sounded hollow even to his ears. The man had known wealth once. Cattle driven across miles of open land, silver coins stacked heavy in his pocket, a family waiting at the end of each trail. He had lost all of it. The herd burned in a raid, his wife taken by fever, his daughter swallowed by smoke and flame on the night his house was torched. Since then, Elias had carried a hollow ache that no whiskey nor fistfight could quiet. He thought perhaps this land, this battered ranch, could be the stone on which to rebuild himself. The West had broken him before. Maybe it could mend him too. The barn door groaned when he shoved it open. Dust poured from the rafters like old secrets falling into light. At first he saw nothing but shadows, broken tools, stacks of warped lumber, the outline of a wagon missing its wheels. He stepped inside, boots echoing against the hollow floorboards, and the air turned colder, sharper, as if he had walked into a cave buried beneath snow. A strange scent hung there, not the expected musk of hay or dung, but something sour, metallic, almost like blood left too long in the sun. His eyes adjusted. That was when he froze. She hung there. A girl, or no, not a girl at all, but something impossibly larger. Her head brushed the rafters, her hair spilling in dark rivers over her shoulders. Her feet dangled 6 feet above the ground, bare toes blue at the edges. The rope creaked as she swayed, back and forth, a silent pendulum in the half-light. Her skin was pale, stretched taut over enormous limbs, and her face, sweet God, her face was both young and ancient. The mouth slack, the eyes half open, glassy yet watching. Elias stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. His breath clawed in his chest. His hand went to his revolver out of habit. But what bullet could mean anything against such a sight? He blinked, rubbed his eyes, cursed under his breath. Still she hung there, as real as the boards under his boots. His throat tightened. "Hell's bells," he whispered, voice shaking. "What kind of devilry?" The horse outside whinnied and stamped, sensing what he could not name. Elias wanted to run, to mount and ride until the land itself forgot his name. But something, whether curiosity, stubborn pride, or the echo of his daughter's face in that pale visage, kept his boots nailed to the floor. Slowly, breath shallow, he stepped closer. The rope groaned above as though alive, fiber splitting. Her hand was within reach, massive, fingers curled like roots of an old tree. Against every sane instinct, Elias reached out. His fingertips brushed hers. Cold, not the cold of stone, but the cold of something that had once known warmth. He flinched, but then held steady, palm pressed against the skin that seemed too real for a dream. And then he felt it. A tremor, a faint movement beneath the flesh. He jerked back. His mind screamed, insisting it was impossible. The dead did not stir, not like that. Yet he had felt it. A breath, faint as dust sliding across wood. His eyes shot to her chest. At first it seemed still, collapsed, empty. But then he saw it, barely, subtly, the rise, the fall. His pulse hammered against his temples. She was not gone. She was not hanging in silence, as a corpse should. Something within her clung to life, tethered by rope and shadow. Elias stumbled backward, colliding with the barn door, forcing it wider to let in the dying light of evening. The sky outside burned red, clouds torn open like wounds. He staggered to the threshold, chest heaving, every instinct urging him to leave. But his boots locked again, as though the earth itself demanded he witness. He turned back, eyes fixed on the impossible figure, swaying gently in the rafters. The rope groaned once more, louder this time, splitting fibers, screaming like a voice that had been gagged too long. And then her eyes opened fully. They were vast, glowing faintly in the dim barn, reflecting the last light of day. And in them Elias saw no malice, no emptiness, only sorrow, deep and endless, like a canyon with no bottom. His revolver sagged at his side. His throat worked around a wordless cry. He could not move, could not breathe. Dead but not gone. The wind outside roared across the prairie, rattling the gate. The mare screamed and pulled against her reins. Elias pressed his back against the wood, heart thundering as those enormous eyes locked onto his. Whatever lived inside that barn was no ghost. It was something far more dangerous. And he was standing on cursed ground. Elias did not sleep that night. He sat at the warp table inside the ranch house with a lantern burning low, the flame jittering against cracked walls and peeling paint. His revolver rested beside a bottle of rye, but neither steadied him. Each gust of wind that rattled the shutters seemed to carry whispers, low and mournful, as if the land itself grieved. He kept seeing her eyes, that enormous gaze filled with sorrow, alive though her body swayed from the noose like a corpse. More than once he reached for the door, meaning to saddle his mare and abandon the place, but his hand always fell back to the table. Running had never saved him before. It had only left him emptier. At dawn he dragged himself outside. The sky stretched wide and merciless, streaked with pink and gold, but the beauty did nothing to ease the weight pressing on his chest. The barn door loomed in the distance, slightly ajar as though inviting him back into its secrets. He didn't enter. Not yet. Instead, he walked the property, trying to breathe life into the dream he had purchased. Fences sagged. The well was nearly dry. The soil looked as if it hadn't yielded a crop in decades. Every board creaked with decay. Every nail seemed half loosened, as if the land itself was pushing man-made things away. By noon he saddled his mare and rode into the nearest town, a cluster of weather-beaten buildings along a dusty main street. People watched him as he tied his horse, their stares lingering too long, not with curiosity but wariness. He stepped into the mercantile, asked for flour and tobacco, and silence thickened like smoke. The shopkeeper's hands trembled as he packed the goods. "You the one who bought Red Hollow Ranch?" the man muttered, his eyes flicking away. Elias confirmed it, voice flat. The shopkeeper's face paled, and he gave Elias his change as though handling a cursed coin. Later, in the saloon, Elias pressed for answers. Cards slapped on tables, whiskey poured, but conversation faltered when he spoke. Finally an old sheriff, long retired and drunk to the marrow, staggered over and leaned close. His breath stank of rotgut. "Some land don't belong to men," he whispered, his rheumy eyes fixing on Elias. "Red Hollow's one of 'em. Folk been seein' things there longer than I been breathin'. A giant girl hangin' in the barn, cursed for sins no one remembers. Every man who tried to claim that place met ruin." He wheezed out a laugh that was more cough than mirth. "And now it's your turn, stranger." Elias stared into his glass, the sheriff's words scraping against memories he tried to bury. He thought of his daughter's small hand clutching his as fire swallowed their home, of the helplessness that hollowed him. The giant girl's eyes had carried the same grief. Perhaps it was madness, perhaps whiskey twisting his thoughts, but something in him refused to dismiss her as mere specter. He left the saloon, the afternoon sun glaring hard enough to blind. On the boardwalk outside, 3 men waited, lean, hard-eyed, spurs clinking as they stepped forward. Their coats hung open just enough to show the gleam of revolvers. "That ranch ain't yours to keep," one said, his voice slick as oil. "Best you sell us the deed and ride on, before it swallows you." Elias's hand hovered near his gun, his body tensed, instincts sharpened by years of cattle trails and raids. "Not for sale," he growled. The first man sneered, spat in the dust. The second went for his weapon. The alley erupted with thunder. Elias dropped to a knee, revolver flashing in his hand. Gunfire split the air, the acrid stench of powder burning his nostrils. He fired once, twice. Men staggered back, one collapsing in the dirt, another screaming as a bullet tore through his arm. The third fled, boots pounding against the boards as townsfolk scattered. Silence followed, sharp and heavy, broken only by Elias's ragged breath. He holstered his weapon, blood ringing in his ears, and mounted his mare without a word. The ride back to the ranch was long and tense. Each hoofbeat echoed like a drum of war. He half expected the surviving men to follow, to strike under cover of darkness. But when he reached the gate, the land itself seemed to have been waiting. The barn loomed tall against the setting sun, doors yawning wide. The air grew colder the moment he crossed the threshold, shadows thickening, swallowing the light. She was still there, hanging, but not lifeless. Her eyes blazed faintly, catching the glow of dusk, following him as he stepped inside. Elias's chest tightened. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. For a moment he swore her lips moved, forming shapes too slow, too broken to be words. He shivered. The rope above groaned. Dust sifted from the rafters. The giant girl's chest rose, fell, rose again. The rhythm of life, faint but undeniable. Elias reached instinctively for the cross at his neck, but found none. He had sold it long ago to pay a debt. Alone, with nothing but a revolver and his battered will, he stood trembling in the barn. Outside, coyotes howled across the plain. The sound slithered through the broken boards, mocking, hungry. Elias's fingers twitched at his side, though no bullet could quiet what dangled before him. He had faced bandits, storms, disease, and death, but never had his bones rattled with fear like this. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange pull gnawed at him. He saw in her face not just terror, but a plea that mirrored the gaze of a little girl who had once begged him not to let go. Elias stepped closer, voice shaking, almost a whisper. "If you're cursed, then so am I." Her enormous eyes flared brighter, a faint glow seeping into the gloom. The rope above shuddered, strands fraying, splitting under invisible strain. Elias raised his arm to shield his face as dust and would rain down, and in the silence that followed, broken only by the pounding of his heart, he realized he was no longer standing before a corpse. He was standing before something waking. The snap of the rope echoed like a gunshot through the barn, sharp and final. Elias flinched as the sound tore through the rafters, followed by the heavy thud of wood splintering above. Dust and fragments of hemp rained over him. His breath caught as the noose unraveled, and the giant girl fell forward, knees striking the earth with a force that made the floorboards quake. She did not rise to strike, nor did she howl like some phantom torn from hell. She wept, a sound low and guttural at first, swelling into a sob, so vast it filled the space, rattling in Elias's chest until he felt his ribs might crack. She buried her enormous face in her hands, shoulders trembling. Her voice rolled out like thunder smothered in grief. Elias stood frozen, revolver useless at his side, caught between terror and compassion. That sound was not the wail of a monster. It was the cry of something broken, something that reminded him of nights when he too had buried his head in his hands, alone in the ashes of what he once loved. Slowly, carefully, he lowered his weapon. His boots creaked on the boards as he stepped closer. "Girl," he rasped, though she was no child. "Can you hear me?" Her head lifted, eyes swollen with tears, glowing faintly in the dim. She opened her mouth, and a word slipped out, fractured, as though her tongue had forgotten its shape. "Althea." The name struck the air like a bell. Elias blinked, startled not by the sound but by the humanity in it. She was not simply some cursed vision. She had a name, an identity, a history carved into syllables. "Althea," he repeated, testing it on his tongue. His voice softened despite himself. "What in God's name happened to you?" Her answer came in fragments, words tangled like roots beneath a storm. She spoke of a time long before his, of betrayal and vengeance, of a curse woven into the land itself. A family of settlers, greedy and cruel, had bound her with rope not of hemp but of blood and oath. For generations she had hung, neither alive nor dead, bound to Red Hollow, forced to watch men claim the ranch only to be consumed by misfortune. Her tears shimmered as she spoke, dripping onto the ground like rain after drought. Elias listened, though half his mind screamed at him to flee. Yet the more she spoke, the more he saw her not as monster, but as victim. Her pain carried the same timbre as his own, a life shattered by fire, betrayal, loss. He clenched his jaw. Perhaps the world had paired them not by accident, but by design. The silence that followed did not last. Hoofbeats pounded outside, fast and many, like drums of war. Elias's head snapped toward the door. Shadows cut across the fading light. He knew who they were, the men from town, greedy for land, hungry for whatever secrets Red Hollow held. He swore under his breath and bolted for the door. Lantern light spilled over a half-dozen riders as they dismounted, rifles glinting in the dusk. Their leader sneered, voice cold. "Told you, McGraw. This land swallows men whole. Hand it over, and maybe you'll keep breathing." Elias raised his revolver, the weight familiar, the cylinder still warm from the alley fight. "You'll have to dig a grave for me first." Gunfire shattered the evening. Elias dove behind the trough as bullets splintered wood, dirt spraying his face. He fired back, each shot quick and sharp. One rider fell, screaming as he clutched his side. Another staggered but kept coming. The air burned with smoke and powder, acrid in his lungs. Then the barn shuddered. A massive shadow filled its doorway. The mercenaries froze as Althea stepped into the light, towering above them, hair wild, eyes blazing with sorrow and fury. She did not need weapons. She was one. With a sweep of her arm, she sent two men sprawling, rifles flying. The earth shook with her every step. Elias rose from cover, disbelief mingling with grim resolve. "Guess you're on my side," he muttered, firing again, felling another man who tried to flank her. The battle raged in a blur of motion, bullets hissing, horses screaming, Althea's fists pounding the ground until the riders scattered in terror. Those who lived fled into the night, their shouts fading across the plains. The silence that followed was jagged, broken only by Elias's labored breath and the distant howl of wolves. He staggered toward her, holstering his revolver. Blood ran warm from a gash on his arm where a bullet had grazed him, but he paid it little mind. Althea loomed over him, her massive frame trembling, tears cutting paths through the dust on her cheeks. He met her eyes without fear this time. "You saved me," he said simply. She shook her head slowly. Her voice came low, almost a growl. "One must die for the other to live." The words cut through him sharper than any bullet. Elias felt the world tilt, the weight of her meaning pressing down until his knees buckled. His hand clutched the wound at his side, deeper than he realized, bleeding fast. Pain flared hot, then numb. He swayed where he stood, forcing his eyes to remain on hers. "What do you mean?" he croaked, though he already sensed the truth. The curse bound them, life tied to death. If she were to be free, someone else must pay the price. And he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that price had always been waiting for him. Althea lowered herself until her face was level with his, vast eyes gleaming with grief. She cradled him in her hand as if he were fragile glass. He felt her tears fall warm against his skin. The barn behind them moaned in the wind. The land held its breath, waiting. Elias's vision blurred, but he forced himself to stay conscious, to hold her gaze. He had failed once before, failed to protect his own flesh and blood. He would not fail again, not if redemption still had a place in this cursed world. The words slipped from his lips, ragged but certain. "Then I'll be the one." Her cry rose like thunder across the plains, a sound of sorrow so immense it silenced the night birds, startled the coyotes, even hushed the restless wind. Elias's eyes closed, his hand slipping from the revolver at his hip. Darkness pressed in, heavy and complete, but not without peace. And in that silence, the choice was made. The dawn broke over Red Hollow like a wound healing, the first light bleeding across the horizon in streaks of crimson and gold. Elias stirred weakly where he lay in the tall grass, breath shallow, each exhale rattling against cracked ribs. The night's violence had left its marks, blood crusted along his shirt, pain radiating in pulses from his side. But it was not the wounds alone that weakened him. It was the knowledge of what he must give. Althea knelt nearby, her immense frame bowed forward, eyes fixed on him with a sorrow that seemed older than the hills themselves. She did not speak, but he felt the weight of her silence pressing heavier than words ever could. He managed a faint smile, dry and bitter. "Don't look at me like that. Man's gotta die of something." His voice was rough, scraping at the air, yet there was a strange calm in it. Once long ago, he had feared death, had raged against its cruel hand when it tore his wife and daughter from him. But now, lying broken on cursed soil with a giant shadow falling over him, he felt a quiet resolve. Redemption had always been running just ahead, out of reach. Now he could touch it. Althea leaned close, and for the first time, he saw not the cursed creature, but a young woman trapped inside a body too vast for her spirit. Tears pooled in her enormous eyes, falling heavy as rain around him. She whispered his name, each syllable trembling. "Elias, you don't have to." He coughed, the sound wet, and shook his head. "Yes, I do. Land wants a sacrifice. Been waiting generations for one who'll give it freely. And I reckon it chose me." His gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the prairie stretched endless, shimmering in the morning heat. "I've been running from ghosts too long. Time I stopped." The air shifted. A strange hum rose from the earth beneath them, deep and resonant, as though the land itself was listening. Grass stirred though no wind touched it, the soil trembling faintly. Althea shuddered, pressing her massive hands against the ground as if steadying herself. Elias reached for her with a hand that shook, placing his palm against her skin one final time. The contrast was stark, his weathered flesh, her immense cold surface. But in that moment the gulf between them vanished. His strength ebbed quickly, like water slipping through cupped hands. Every breath became shallower, every blink slower. Yet his mind was clear. He thought of his daughter, of the way she once laughed when he lifted her high on his shoulders. He thought of nights beside the fire with his wife, the warmth of her hand in his. He thought of the land, wild and merciless, that had broken him and now offered him one last chance to leave something better behind. Althea lowered her head, voice cracking as she murmured, "Why you?" "Because I've got nothing left but this," he whispered, his lips curved in the faintest smile. "And because maybe a man's measured not by what he keeps, but by what he's willing to give." The hum deepened, vibrating through the barn ruins, through the soil, through the marrow of his bones. His vision darkened at the edges, yet he did not resist. He surrendered. A warmth spread from his chest outward, consuming the pain, burning away fear until only light remained. Althea cried out, a sound that shook the valley, yet in her cry was not only sorrow but release. The curse shattered. The rope that had once bound her crumbled into dust, vanishing in the morning light. The pall over the land lifted, grass brightened, rivers stirred, birds rose from hidden nests in sudden chorus. Althea's form shimmered, towering frame dissolving like mist until only a young woman remained, no larger than any mortal, her features soft and human, tears streaking her cheeks. She gasped, clutching her chest as air filled her lungs, freely for the first time in centuries. Where Elias had lain, the grass was unmarked save for the revolver at rest beside a single boot print. His body was gone, carried into the soil, into the breath of the prairie. The sacrifice had been accepted. Althea knelt there for a long time, hands pressed to the earth, whispering his name like a prayer. Around her the land bloomed. Wildflowers sprang up where dust once reigned, and the air grew sweet with new life. The ranch that had devoured men for generations now pulsed with renewal. Days passed, then weeks. Travelers who once avoided Red Hollow began to speak of strange wonders, crops thriving in dry soil, streams running clear, a young woman tending the farm alone, with a quiet strength. She never spoke of the giant who once hung in the rafters, nor of the man who freed her with his blood. But sometimes, when dusk bled across the horizon, she would walk to the small rise, where the grass grew tallest, and place a single flower in the soil. The wind always seemed to rise then, carrying a whisper that might have been a name. The story of Elias McGraw spread through saloons and campfires. warped and reshaped by tongues eager for legend. Some said he outshot a dozen mercenaries before falling. Others swore he made a pact with the spirit of the land. Few spoke of the truth, that he had chosen death not for gold, not for glory, but for redemption. And perhaps that truth mattered more than the legend. The West was built on sacrifice, each frontier carved from the bones of men who gave more than they had. Elias's tale was just one among thousands, but it carried the weight of something greater, the reminder that even the broken can mend, that even the damned can choose to give light. So if you find yourself standing on cursed ground, staring at ghosts that won't let go, remember the rancher who spent his fortune chasing redemption and gave his life so another could live. His name still rides the wind across Red Hollow, carried in whispers only the land can hear. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Some stories live only as long as they are told, and this one deserves to ride a little farther beneath the endless sky.